Devils Wednesday. This is the State of the Fan Address, episode 185, titled "The Devils Are ... good?" ? I'm your host, Sam Wu, here with Pucks and Pitchforks blog editor-in-chief, and something happened to his camera feed. I don't know what that was. Nick Villano, streaming live on Facebook Live, YouTube Live, Twitter Live, and Twitch on the Let's Go Devils Network. Nick, I can hear you in my ear, but I don't know what happened to your camera feed. What happened? Is that a Zoom shot?
It died. It like froze, and now it's pulling from the
Oh, and we lost Nick. Unfortunately, we lost Nick. I will have to take over. This is what happens on a live podcast. We do our tech checks. Everything is fine. As soon as you go on air, guess what happens? Something happens. But we have a fine podcast for you tonight. We got Scott Maxwell from the Daily Faceoff and Alex Chavancy of the Hockey Writers, because the Devils are really, really, really good right now, or at least our record shows. I'm not sure what happened to Nick. Nick, I'm going to figure this thing out, but...
Okay, I can talk. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, can they hear me?
Yeah, let me figure
Why don't you work on it? Let me talk for 5 minutes while you...
No, actually, I can't do that because I got to disconnect you in order to make it happen.
Okay, you talk and do this.
Yeah, I'll talk and do all the tech work. I'll hold the fort. Anyway, Nick, you'll be gone for a little bit. All right, so here's the story. Last night, Devils go into Vancouver. They had a slow start. Understandable. Jet lag, 10 p.m. start. Whatever it is, it was somewhat of a slow start, but Mackenzie Blackwood did his job, kept the team in it for the first 10 minutes. Vancouver was looking pretty decent, putting their shots on goal, all that stuff. And guess what happened? The Devils started scoring. And they started scoring, and then pretty much took over the game. I mean, Horvat made it interesting, but the Devils really took over the game. Confidence, they were confident, and yeah. Now I hear myself in my ear. I had to kick Nick off, but anyway. This is what happens when you do a live podcast and there is equipment failure. As the producer and engineer and host, I'm trying to figure it out on live air. I hope you fans appreciate the kind of talent level behind the scenes, because it happens sometimes. It happens sometimes, and yeah, and also we have a guest coming up around 8:40. And sometimes the pressure gets to you. I'm trying to, now text Nick, make sure the USB camera is snug and plugged in as I'm resetting his computer. See, this is what goes on behind the scenes. But we got Scott Maxwell, and I've got some pressure on me. 4 minutes to get Nick on live air and get him going. But here's the problem. Nick is back on, and I was mute the entire time.
Oh, I see the problem.
What'd you do? You screwed it up, didn't you? When your camera fell in pre-show. Nick, are you there? Nope. Nick, you got to relog back in. See, Nick now is trying to be like the producer and trying to figure it out, but I will do it for him because that's what I do. Nick, I hear you now. What'd you do? Because the camera fell during pre-show. I didn't think much of it. Did you damage something?
No, I don't think so, but there's something wrong with one of the ports because I flipped the ports, and then when I flipped the ports, the camera worked, and then the sound didn't work. So I have to use another port.
Let the engineer handle it.
Well, it wouldn't have worked if I didn't change the ports. We have completely different ports now.
Well, I sent you a text. Anyway, it doesn't matter. I don't think the listeners want to know what our tech problems are, but at least, like in true New Jersey Devils fashion of this season, we figured it out. The Devils have figured it out. And we just gave you a live example of how we figured stuff out on air, and I still don't know how it was fixed. But it doesn't matter because we're winning, and our guest is going to come up soon.
Yeah, so anyway, and I was telling you before the podcast, first of all, you didn't say anything about the hat. Let's talk. Do you see the hat?
Nick, from a distance, I thought that was a New Jersey Nets hat.
Oh, that's weird. No, yeah. I found the Dougie Hamilton pork roll hat.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, it was I believe it's called True Jersey is the site. So if you want this pork roll hat, this nifty pork roll hat. I
gotta interrupt you. The comments in YouTube Live was, "You're muted, Sam. You got 2 problems now." LOL. 0-2 start to the podcast today, Evan. Bravo. Man. That was a great analogy right there. Kudos to our listeners. Kudos to all those that, hey, you know what? We have dumpster fires here on the podcast as well. Do you guys start chanting fire woo, fire woo? No, within 10 seconds or in 10 days.
Do you really want to ask them if they do that? Do you want to know if they do that, Sam? I don't think you want.
You know what, Nick? Here's my segue to your beautiful article that's now up on pucksandpitchforks.com because we saved the day in about 10 seconds, but Lindy Ruff saved the day or saved his job in 10 days. And I'm going to go full screen on the website, pucksandpitchforks.com, Nick. And I will say, the title is very revealing. New Jersey Devils, how to save your job in 10 days.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I was trying to do a little fun wordplay there, right? But it's so funny how things turned around in 10 days. October 15th, the Devils fans are chanting fire Lindy, over and over again. It was deafening. Lindy Ruff had to address it in the post-game comments, talking about the passion of the Devils fan. And he said, I can't remember word for word what he said, but it was something to effect of, I get it. He
and
gets
this was after the 16-second interview question from the previous game.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, Lindy was already, he was a little, I don't want to say heated, but he was short in the first game when he was asked about playing time for Jesper Bratt. But he was contrite. It was something I hadn't seen in Lindy Ruff. I will say this. And he made changes. He made nothing drastic, Sam. And not the changes that I'm over. I'm over the lines changing all the time and over things. But he made changes to the system. He made changes of what he truly impacts. And the Devils started finishing. They started getting big shots in high danger areas, and they made a big comeback. They showed tenacity against the Ducks. They showed a finishing ability against the Red Wings. They showed that they could shut a team down against the Islanders. They're winning in different ways, Sam, but it's all basically the same system. And I got to hand it to Lindy Ruff because Lindy Ruff looks like a really good coach right now.
Yeah, and I'm glad he's doing well because I've had text messages from friends DM saying that, Sam, please don't quadruple down on your Lindy Ruff love. And I was getting scared there because it was going to blow up in my face. But Lindy Ruff in 10 days, hey, the Devils are winning. And the way they're winning is actually pretty impressive, the way they're peppering shots. But our next guest is in the green room.
Oh, nice.
Is in the green room. So after an 0-2 start on this podcast of technical issues, fumbling, disorganized, we even gave up a shorthanded goal in the first 10 minutes of this podcast. But now we have Scott Maxwell from the Daily Faceoff on. You can find him on Twitter at ScottMaxW. Scott, you're on with Sam and Nick. How are you tonight?
I'm excellent. How are you guys?
Pretty good.
We're great. We're very excited to have you on, Scott. Scott, you wrote about the Devils this week on Daily Faceoff. It was part of your power rankings column. It's been an exciting week. That's why we're having you on. We're really happy to have you here.
I'm happy to be on. Happy to talk some Devils a little bit, even though it's not exactly my field, but anything is, just sorry, lost my train of thought there. But yeah,
no worries.
They've been playing really good hockey. Yeah.
They've
been playing really good
hockey. We're talking hockey here. And I'm excited to have you on because I do think that your expertise is warranted and you're being contrite, and I appreciate that. But it's going to be fun. So let's jump right into it. The Devils have been dominant against most of their opponents prior to the Vancouver game last night. They were still able to win last night. And I mean, if you look at the final score, 5-2, looks like dominant fashion. If you watch the game, not so dominant, but were you, in a word, more impressed that this team is winning without those dominant performances, without doubling up on shots of their opponent, in a night where you need a little puck luck, you need a little tenacity? Is that more impressive than what you've seen prior to that?
I think it's impressive on its own. If it's something that happens from time to time, it's certainly good that they can still pull out wins even on their worst nights. But if that is more of what's to come with the Devils, then that might be a little bit more cause for concern. If anything, I always find it more impressive when teams start off strong, take a big lead, and then just keep hammering down after that, because you don't see that a lot with a lot of teams. You'll get that 3-1 lead and you'll just sit back and let the clock run out, and sometimes that comes back to bite them in the butt. So it's nice to see that, especially with that Columbus game on Sunday. Even when they took that big lead, even with the fact that they were playing a weaker opponent, they just kept hammering down on and kept getting points and goals. And but in a case of last night, still, even seeing them survive that first period, I think was where it looked like they struggled the most. And getting, they got some goaltending from Blackwood to keep them, they were still scoring, so it's not like they were in desperate need of it. But, he kept it a shutout as well for a long time while they were struggling. And then it was almost more impressive that even when they were playing bad and they had started to, even when they had the big lead after playing bad, they realized still, we still need to play better, and then picked up on that and were playing better throughout the rest of the game, even with that 4-0 lead for a while. And even as the Canucks scored goals, it wasn't so much that the Devils were playing bad. It's just that's when the Canucks happened to capitalize on their chances.
And listen, I agree. I mean, those are great points. I agree with you on being impressed by the tenacity. I'm reminded of the 2019 home opener where they went up 4-0 and then lost. So it is, and that was a bad team. I call that the Nikita Gusev year, because that's all I remember, is that we were so excited about a guy who's has one of the worst NHL careers I've ever seen in my life. But I think that the tenacity of this team, that's the difference, is the mindset of this is never enough. And this is we need to continue with whatever we're doing when it's going well. I do want to kind of jump to something I haven't talked about a ton because I kind of don't know what to make of it. Maybe you can help me out here. Andre Palat, he's out for weeks, maybe probably months, but I'll say weeks just to, we're still waiting on a true timetable. But he had groin surgery. That sounds terrible. How much do you think that's going to impact this team? He was the big signing, the $6 million man. Is this going to be something that, they played completely differently last night? It wasn't the first night without him, but do you think that this is going to have a long-term effect on the ability of this team to win?
Well, I think you're certainly going to miss a guy like Andre Palat. Just what he brings to a team is certainly valuable. We've seen it for so many years with Tampa Bay. Just his ability to be plugged into any line in the lineup, really, and he can just connect with the guys he's playing with. Just because that's you don't see that from a lot of players where they just have that ability to be a consistent two-way threat and just a constant forechecker and be a pain in the ass to some players. And then that creates a lot of the space for the skilled guys, like as we saw with Point, Kucherov, and Stamkos in Tampa. And now I'm not I forget which lines he was playing on early on, but still, like guys like Heischer, Hughes, Bratt, he's going to create space for them. I guess if there is an upside, it's the fact that at least timing wise, it came early in the season, so he'll be back in the lineup hopefully when the games start to get more important. And he also hasn't really established chemistry with any of the Devils yet, so it's not like they're missing out. Like, oh no, now we have this big hole in the lineup that we can't fill. They're still experimenting with the lineup early on. And I did see that Fabian Zetterlund was getting some reps in the top six now in his place. And while I'm not like a big prospect expert or anything, we have other people on Daily Faceoff for that. Just some of the numbers I've seen of what Zetterlund has put up in the early going, both like with his play driving ability and his scoring ability, have looked pretty promising. So I'm kind of excited to see how he does in a top six role in place of Palat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that he is a prospect that a lot of Devils fans are very excited about. He played in the NHL at the end of last season and looked very promising. He's been in and out of the lineup to start this year. He's kind of one of those weird waivers because he's no longer waiver, or he is waiver eligible. I'm always weirded out by how to say that. He would have to go through waivers to go down to the AHL. So the Devils are kind of hamstrung to keep him on the roster because they would lose him. Somebody would claim him, the Coyotes or the Kings or, whether it's a bottom feeder team or a team in the middle, somebody was going to take him off their hands if he put him through waivers. So he was fortunate enough to stay on the roster and kind of practice with the team. And when he got a chance, he's jumping right in the top six, like you said. And that's incredibly impressive. Like, I'm excited to see what he brings to the table because he's got the quote unquote NHL body, like 6'3", 215 pounds, a bruiser who can score. Like, he has a lot of the things that you want to see if you're a traditional hockey fan, I guess, right? Is that like the words I'm looking for? He looks like a hockey player kind of thing.
Yeah. Like he looks like that traditional hockey player kind of vibes, even if like that's not necessarily his playing style. Like I don't really see him running around fighting people, I guess. But yeah, he's got that big physical style to him.
And his line mate is Nico Hischier, who's been on flipping fire to start the year. He looks every bit the number one overall pick that he was. Maybe he's not Cale Makar, but I do not regret getting Nico Hischier in that draft right now. He looks like he could be that supreme two-way player. I don't want to throw out the names like Patrice Bergeron because he's one of the best who's ever done that specific style of play. But when you talk about that style of play, Nico Hischier looks like he can be an 75, 80-point player who can also play on the penalty kill and shut you down. Am I seeing this out of rose-colored glasses? Do I have pretty boy eyes right now for my captain or from a neutral observer like you, Scott? Are you seeing the same thing? Are you seeing a two-way dynamo right now?
I think we're definitely starting to see that for sure. Well, Heischer's just been so underrated throughout his like entire career up to this point, just because, like as you mentioned, he was picked first overall in a draft that was then later saw Cale Makar go. So he's always going to be like, oh, well, he's not that good. And he hasn't put up until last season, the big flashy point totals that everyone likes to see when judging if a guy's good or not. And he also has dealt with his fair share of injuries. So he just hasn't played as much. So just not a lot of eyes on him either. So like, you're going to have people like think that, oh, maybe he's a bust, boom, bust, stuff like that. But
Yeah.
the thing is, he really hasn't been, at the very least, bad defensively throughout his career. Like, his numbers in his rookie season were a bit rough in that regard. But since then, he's, at the very least, been solid, holding his own. We haven't really... It's hard to tell if he really is, like, a driver of, like, just a strong defensive line, because he's either been on teams that have been horrendously bad defensively that just it's not as hard to compare to, or in the case of a season like this where just everyone is so good defensively, it's hard to truly tell right now if it's him that's driving the bus. But there's a lot of good signs that he is at the very least a like competent two-way player, probably ends up being the guy later on in their careers that is the one that they throw to shut down the other opponent's top line while also getting a lot of points. He's scoring more now as well, so I think that's going to give him a lot of attention. And also, he's still only 23. I think we kind of forget that that's still pretty young. He's just starting to enter those prime years of just him being a threat in the NHL, because, we see guys like Matthews, McDavid, they're lighting the league when they're 19, 20. So and he's a first overall pick too, so he's going to get that comparison. But I think, we are slowly starting to see Hischier become, I don't want to throw Selke out there yet, but like he's certainly becoming a solid defensive forward.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with all those points. I think that makes a lot of sense, because it's hard to be a solid defensive forward when you're 20, 21. You're not fully filled out, and you're getting used to the speed of the game. And you mentioned his rookie season. He actually played with Taylor Hall that year, and that was the year that Taylor Hall won the MVP. So that was just a wild year in general. So I think it was like, you're a rookie and you're playing with a superstar who wins MVP, and you're on the franchise, you go back to the playoffs. So I feel like he was just trying to catch up. You know what I mean? Like, he was just trying to keep up with it all. But somebody who's not having any trouble keeping up with it all is Jesper Bratt. Jesper Bratt has looked like one of the best players in the NHL. And I've looked at all the stats. I've tried to not look at this in rose-colored glasses, but this guy, he's up there in points. He's up there in advanced statistics. He looks the part. He's playing the part. What, from your side of things, from just an observer of the NHL, what I guess my first question is, how big of a mistake did the Devils make giving him a 1-year deal this offseason?
Well, if I remember correctly, that was more him insisting on that kind of a 1-year deal, right? Like, I feel like that was more him wanting to bet on himself. So in that sense, it wasn't necessarily management's fault, because there's not much you can really do when a player's like, I want a 1-year deal. Like, this isn't like NHL GM mode where you can like change the years and maybe adjust the salary a little bit and they'll agree to it. Like, as a Leafs fan, I saw that with Austin Matthews when his contract was initially up. Like, you'd want to see him sign 7 or 8 years, but he wanted 5. You can't really say no to whatever Matthews wants. So like that's a big thing too. But I also don't blame management, even if it was also their decision to maybe bridge him for that extra year, because while we have started to see Bratt become a really good player in the NHL, it wasn't really until last season that he took that extra step and became, like, at worst close to elite, if not elite. And when you only have one season to look at for that stuff, it's not the worst idea to take a bet and just be like, hey, let's maybe try another year. Make sure that he's this is the kind of player that we have in him before we sign him to big money. Because if he ends up being really good but not elite, then you get him at 5 years for long term. But if he ends up being elite, then maybe it's closer to 8 or 9. While if they did that in the past summer, you're probably looking at like closer to 7. I'm not sure if there were any numbers thrown out as to whether or not he was like what his contract or his salary would look like if he was signed long term. But
not that anything that's confirmable. Absolutely, like everything's just kind of an educated guess at this point.
Yeah, I tried to find something earlier today to see if I had any ideas, but I couldn't find anything either. But like assuming, it was maybe going off of his arbitration, what he filed in arbitration. If it was like $6 million for 1 year, you assume he probably would have looked for around 7 for long term. So like if you have him locked up to $7 million and he ends up being a 50 point scorer, it's not the best contract to have, especially at this state in the Devils franchise when they want to start being competitive years after year. While if you have a 80-90 point score locked up to $9 million, that's not the worst case scenario, even if it is a couple extra $1 million than you did before.
That's fair. Yeah. But so my second part of that question is, from an outsider's point of view, does he look like somebody who's going to be one of the better players in the league? Does he look like an elite player like you mentioned before?
A lot of the numbers are definitely pointing in that direction. Again, I'm always someone who's kind of on the side of caution before really crowning players. Like I need to see at least a couple full seasons before I really decide like if this player is legit. In this regard, obviously he's good. Like we know he's an NHL player, but and then maybe like I'm not sure what kind of contract he'd get in the offseason, just because winger versus center deals are always so tough to nail down, because you might have a winger who's scoring at the same pace as a center, but will get $1 million or $2 million less than him. Plus with the Devils too, you have Heischer at just over 7. You have Hughes at $8 million. So like, depending on how the Devils want to play this out, could Bratt even be asking for more than Hughes in that situation? Like, can they just be like, well, no, Hughes makes this, so you can't make more than him?
Yeah, and we kind of saw that with Colorado, right? Joe Sakic would always play the McKinnon makes this. Do you think you're worth more than McKinnon? And it worked until Rantanen, and then Rantanen broke the bank, and now McKinnon makes what 12 and change starting next year. So
12.6, I think it's like a shade more than McDavid.
I'm sure that wasn't purposeful, right?
Oh yeah, totally. I think if I remember correctly, the contract is literally double his last salary. I feel like it was definitely intentional.
That's funny. But yeah, no, I again, the Devils let Bratt bet on himself. It was better than going to arbitration in their minds, which I agree with. And he's winning, and if you got to pay him more than Hughes, especially with the cap looking like it's gonna go up again, you can't lose a Bratt. You just can't. It's something you just can't do. It's a marvel that you got this 6th round pick to look like he did. In short, do you agree that there's nothing you could do? There's no number that you'd say no to within reason?
Well, yeah, like as long as I think if you're getting into double digits, then that's where it starts to get a bit muddier waters. But yeah, like I think anything if it's around the same price as Hughes or Heischer, I think you definitely have to go for that, because at the end of the day, it's more important to have your star players and just consistently build around them year after year, especially if you have a GM who is really good at like finding cheaper talent, or in the case of the Devils right now, because they do have plenty of cap space, they can also make moves to get maybe not cheaper talent, but talent that's undervalued because they might have a slightly pricier contract in the eyes of the teams that hold them. Like Oliver Bjorkstrand, I think the deal that sent him to Seattle, while I really like that deal, that was one that Columbus had to move. So I think that's something that the Devils could be in the market for as well, even if Bratt's making closer to 8 or 9 million with all the contracts that they have coming up this season.
Yeah, absolutely. Scott Maxwell, Daily Faceoff. I want to give you a minute just to kind of promote what you're doing. Where can people find your work? What are you working on right now? How can everybody find what you're doing?
You can follow me on Twitter at SCOTMAXW, basically my first 4 and last 4 of my name. Pretty easy. Plus, there's a lot of Scott Maxwells on Twitter, so it's hard to create a creative handle for that. I don't tweet as much as I used to, which is probably a good thing. So you'll just get smarter thoughts and less frequently, and I won't cloud your timeline. But I do share my work on there that I do with Daily Faceoff. I'm mostly just a news writer at this point. But I do the power rankings as part of what got the attention to bring me on this show, because I had the Devils ranked first this week. So I've been doing that. And maybe there will be more in the future, but for now, that's what I do. You can also, go to the website itself, Daily Faceoff, if you don't have Twitter, and you can see my work, and you can also see some of the work of just some fantastic writers that we have on the team. Senior editors like Matt Larkin and Stephen Ellis, and then we even have some younger writers on their way up, like Mike Gold, Colton Davies, and myself.
Yeah, absolutely, and we'll definitely have more of those writers on. We love Daily Faceoff. We think it's definitely on the up and up. We've had a couple already on. Steve Ellis we've had on a couple times. Ryan Lambert, I think, still writes for Daily Faceoff, right? He's been on the podcast before, so is he still with Daily Faceoff?
Lambert isn't. I think he's EP ringside now, I believe.
I'm sorry. That's maybe, my fault.
No worries.
See, I need a script, Scott. I need a script. I need people to help me along the way. That's my fault. I apologize. But we've definitely had Ellis on. Ellis is a great guest. Couple other, we've really definitely had others from Daily Faceoff. So, and we're gonna have more. And Scott, you've been a great guest. We'll definitely have you on again. We really enjoyed our conversation. We thought it was a lot of fun, and we hope you had fun too.
Yeah, no, it was great to be on and chat Devils with you guys. Hope to see you guys around sometime soon.
Talk to you soon, Scott.
Thanks, Scott. And keep him number 1. That is Scott Maxwell, Daily Faceoff writer. Does the power rankings. And I know all you Devils fans are saying, hey, we're finally getting respect, but just you got to thank Nick Villano. He's starting to lobby a little bit.
I'm pushing these people because I have a lot of lobbying power, don't you know? I'm clearly a figurehead in this community.
You are. I don't want to use those buzzwords that starts with an I.
Oh, an influencer?
Yeah, there are certain marketing terms. I don't like the word content. I don't like the word influencer.
Sam, do you want to be sad?
What?
I'm going to make you sad.
What?
One of the number 1 most wanted jobs for young people, like young people, like little kids, is influencer now.
Oh, I know that. But can you rename it something else that doesn't sound so, I don't know, conniving?
Yeah, I mean, I guess content creator is the technical term, right?
I would just call it, I put my stuff out there, and if you like it, great. If not, take a hike.
It's a very long name for a job, Sam.
It's a long.
How would you fit that on a resume? How would you fit that on your resume?
Hire me.
Okay.
And my resume.
Sam, how do you have a job with this resume? Like, what is this? It says hire me in big letters at the top. It's like, what job do you want? I want the job where you give me money to do lots of things, and the things are really good, and I'm really good at the things.
I just don't like those buzzwords, I'll tell you, because, you hear it, you know what it is, whatever. You know what makes this podcast so successful, Nick, besides the hard work that goes on behind the scenes?
Is it influencers?
No, we just act like ourselves. Whether look, we screwed up 3 times before we had this guest on.
Yeah.
Before we had
and then
Scott
I screwed
on.
up with the guest. I mentioned the guy from a different website.
Yeah,
that was my
fault. You might as well mention their enemy. I don't know, but the point is, but we mess up all the time on this podcast, constantly.
I don't know. What are you trying for here, Sam? What's the goal of this conversation?
We're not a bunch of phonies, essentially. This is who we are. That's what makes this. That's what I think makes the podcast so influential. So you better go on November 12th to American Whiskey for our tweet up, which I'm going to start promoting starting tomorrow. Now that I've settled my my business down in Delaware. Yeah. So November 12th, it's going to be a Jesper Bratt themed night. It's also military night as well at the Rock, and come to American Whiskey, 51 Edison Place. Across the street from Prudential Center, next to Championship Plaza. It's going to be a good time. Pre-game, post-game. Also, we're working with a couple other sources, but we're looking to give away more tickets.
Ooh.
We're looking to give away more tickets. I'm telling you.
To that game, November 12th?
No, on November 12th, we're going to give out tickets for another.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. Great.
Yeah, no, we're smart marketing strategists now. Now I'm using.
You got to get them back in the building. You got to get them back in the building. Don't get in the building tonight. Get them back. They're already here. Get them back in the building.
Yeah, and yeah. Oh boy, I apologize to our next guest. He's in the green room. See, we screw up a lot on this podcast, so I'm going to apologize. Profusely.
There's champagne and grapes in the grape room. Alex is doing fine. Sorry to make you wait, Alex.
Alex. When you go to a game, just stop by American Whiskey. We'll take care of everything. Good friend of the podcast, Alex Chavancy from the Hockey Writers. You can find him on Twitter at AlexC_THW. Alex, how's the champagne in the green room?
Pretty good. I definitely can't complain here. No issues at all. Especially, it's like, I know it's only 10 games into the season. Let's call it winning champagne.
Yeah, listen, I've popped the champagne from being the off-season champion 3 years in a row now. So this is great.
Yeah, that's enough of that.
So Alex Chavancy, we've had you on many times. And we bring you on when we need someone to kind of talk us through the analytics, not the beefalytics, which Sam over there is. He just wants to talk about how much everybody weighs.
Alex, I'll keep my mouth shut, but one of these days we got to talk about this new beefalytics. There's some truth to it. There's a lot of truth to it.
Beefalytics? I don't even think. What is that?
It is a made-up term that came about on this podcast, and now it's just
all right.
It is just.
There's T-shirts.
We've had there's T-shirts. We've had conversations with Chico Resch on it. I'll have to fill you in.
Oh man,
because there's a metric of IQ. The brain IQ.
Yeah.
This is like the version of EQ. If I'm going to make a analogy of it, there's IQ and there's EQ. Beefalytics is more of an eye test of who can be disruptive with their physical presence. And
this sounds like it's harder to calculate than war, Sam.
For example, don't let me interrupt your interview, but just for example, Nathan Bastian, his beefalytics is through the roof right now.
I would say that whole fourth line, really. Miles Wood, McLeod, too. They've been playing really well.
Yeah, I agree. And Alex, you understand the actual analytics and things like XG and XGA and other very complicated mathematical terms that, see, I'm the words guy. I put the words together. I make them all fancy. They sound real great. But when you give me numbers, I'm just going to be like, yeah, let me get my calculator. It's right on my iPhone. This is great. Alex, you know what the numbers actually mean. So, as they say on Reddit, explain like I'm 5. What does it mean that the Devils are doing so well at XG and XGA and all these other analytics, making them look like one of the best teams in the league? What's happening here?
Yeah, so simply put, expected goals is a shot-based metric, and Megan Chaika was talking about this on TSN about the Devils specifically, I think last night before the Canucks game. And expected goals, it measures shot quality, because not every shot is equal. Like a shot from the point is not as high quality as something you're going to get from the slot. So that's what expected goals is. It's a shot-based metric that measures shot volume and shot quality. And the Devils have been really, really good in expected goals to start the season. They're basically right up there with the Carolina Hurricanes in most expected goal stats. On any site you use, either Evolving Hockey, Natural Stat Check, or Money Puck, they're right there with the Hurricanes right now. And Florida Panthers are not too far behind them either. So yeah, I guess I would easily put it this way. I mean, their 7-3 record is definitely justified based on the way they've played at 5-on-5 so far. You could even argue maybe they should have maybe one more win than they do right now. Maybe that Flyers game was pretty winnable, but the Flyers have some voodoo magic going on right now, so I don't know. But yeah, I mean, the Devils really look like they've gotten off to good starts these last couple of seasons under Lindy Ruff, and everyone knows obviously they just kind of fell off for various different reasons. But this time it looks like it's definitely a lot more sustainable than it was the previous 2 seasons.
Yeah, it definitely does. It does look like the system or the team competition, something is working in something's favor for the Devils, and they're looking a lot better. And last year, one thing that was really driving the bus was Jack Hughes. When Jack Hughes was healthy, the team was rolling, especially with his line out there. His line was always dominant. This year, it's been a little weird. Nico Hischier and Jesper Bratt's line has been really dominant, and then the Jack Hughes line was inconsistent up until about 4 games ago. And Jack Hughes has been able to kind of, I don't want to say he's falling under the radar, but as much as Jack Hughes on the New Jersey Devils can fall under the radar, he kind of has, because we haven't talked about him this much on this podcast. I haven't written about him, and nobody on my site has written about him. I haven't seen a lot of Jack Hughes articles in general. I've seen a lot of Jesper Bratt articles. I've seen a lot of Jesper Bratt tweets. I've seen a lot of Nico Hischier tweets. Jeff Merrick talks about Nico Hischier. People are talking about John Marino. Nobody's talking about Jack Hughes. In your opinion, Alex, with all this hype around so many other players on this team, is this still, quote-unquote, Jack Hughes' team? Is he the face of the franchise, the best player, everything, all of the above?
I would say yes. It's kind of funny too that no one's really talking about him, even though he has 10 points in 10 games.
Yeah.
I think that just kind of like speaks to the expectations everyone had on him based on how he played in those 49 games he played a season ago. But just because he's not I wouldn't say performing, just because he doesn't have the point totals that Jesper Bratt has right now doesn't mean he's not playing well. I mean, he was just kind of a little bit snake bitten in those first few games. And like you said before, these last 4 games, I think, was it Todd Cordell pointed it out after the game last night. He has 8 points in his last 4 games, so it's starting to come around for him. But like the shot and chance generation, just fancy stats aside, I mean that's all been there for him through the first 10 games of the season. He was just kind of getting unlucky himself, and then team wasn't really scoring too much when he was on the ice either. But that's starting to change, and I think you're going to be hearing a lot more about Jack Hughes over the next 10 games segment, because I think he's about to go off. I think he's already starting to go off as it is. I still think it's his team too. It's just now that it's not only his team anymore. Like he's the main guy still, but it's also Jesper Bratt and Nico Hischier's team because they're both off to really, really great starts. I mean, Jeff Merrick has just been pumping the Nico Hischier for Selke campaign to, I don't know, for like the last week at least, and he's got a legit argument for it. So, but yeah, I'd still say Jack is the guy. I think at the end of the day, he's probably going to end up. I'd be surprised if Bratt's scoring stays the way it does, but if it does, that wouldn't surprise me either. But I still think Jack is probably going to end up being the team's leading scorer when it's all is said and done.
And you just kind of alluded to Nico Hischier, so that's where we're going to jump there because, of all the surprises on the team. There's a couple of really good ones, and I think the best one has to be Nico Hischier, because if you get Nico Hischier playing at this level, I can't tell you again, you're the math guy, Alex. I can't tell you his pace right off the top of my head, but it's got to be around 80 points right now, an 80-point pace.
It's a little more than that, because I'm writing an article about like 10 thoughts on 10 games. I think he's at like a 92-point pace right now, so something around there. So
even if he stays at 80,
yeah,
right? That's phenomenal, right? That of course. That gives you two legitimate number one centers, which is what the Devils fans have been looking for this whole time. Are your thoughts, and you said you're kind of putting this in your next article. What are your thoughts on the captain's hot start? Is this a sustainable method of success?
Yeah, I think it is. We saw a little bit of it last season. He played really well. He's produced, I think, 60 points in 70 games, which is about 70 points in 82 games. So we saw it coming from him last season, and he, even since his rookie season, he kind of had this reputation of being, a two-way stalwart, which wasn't exactly true. But last season, his defensive game really took a step forward, and now it's kind of like, hey, he might be in the Selke conversation at the end of the season. I was listening to Merrick and Wish this afternoon, and they were talking about it, and Wish said that he surveyed a bunch of anonymous voters, and I think Hischier was in the top 3 for the Selke right now. So obviously Patrice Bergeron still number 1. So I don't know if his scoring is still sustainable. Is going to be sustainable. Like right now, he'd be on pace for 45 goals and 91 points, which is what Jack Hughes basically paced for last season. I don't know if that's going to last, but I think the whole two-way game that's there for good. I think he's going to be playing the hard defensive minutes, while Lindy is going to be deploying Jack in more offensive minutes to try to get him out there to score. But I think what Nico is doing is sustainable. I think it's legit.
And I love to hear that. I love to hear the guys who can dig into those numbers think that these guys are going to stick around. Barring injury, obviously, knock on wood. But seeing Nico in this mode, like this is like Super Saiyan Nico Hischier. Like he's taking things to a level I did not think. We talked about the potential so much over the last couple of years, and we probably talked about, you and me, Alex, just whether it was on Twitter or whether it was here on the podcast, just because it was such a topic of conversation for so long of where's Nico Hischier's ceiling, and it became a little bit more prevalent when Cale Makar kind of jumped out to the hot start, becoming the best defenseman in the league. And Miro Heiskanen is a phenomenal player. Elias Pettersson is a phenomenal player. So it put a little bit more pressure on Nico Hischier to, whether perceived or reality, it put a little bit more pressure being in that draft class. Luckily the Devils didn't pick Nolan Patrick. They ended up with Nico Hischier, was still a phenomenal player last year. But, I do think, and then just maybe give me your thoughts on that. I do think that being in that draft class does put a little bit more pressure on him to be very, very good, if not great.
Yeah, especially since, the guys you mentioned that have emerged, and even Jason Robertson, who went a lot later than those guys. I'm pretty sure he was in that class too, right? And he's turned into like a top line. Yeah, so he's turned into a top line winger now. So yeah, there was definitely a little more pressure on him, especially since there was rumors that I think have gotten out there that the Devils were looking between Cale Makar and Nico Hischier. It wasn't a Nolan versus Nico kind of debate for them. But if Nico keeps up this pace, then I don't know to complain. Even last season when you kind of saw him producing at a 70-point pace, it's like, all right, this is definitely it's a lot. 20. I'm not a fan of doing the whole 2020 revisionist history kind of thing, because at the time there was no way. I think if the Devils had picked Makar at the time, people would have gone nuts that they picked a defenseman who wasn't even playing in the CHL. He was playing in the AJHL. And it's easy to say now, oh, they should have taken Makar because he's maybe top 3 defenseman in the league. But yeah, I think with Hischier now, especially his two-way game coming around, that just that kind of solidifies making the decision that Shero made at the time. And yeah, I mean, if he keeps up this pace, you can't go back and be like, oh, I wish we had Elias Pettersson or something like that. I think right now I'd probably take Hischier over Pettersson. Pettersson's still a really good player, but think Heischer's the more complete player than Pettersson. Pettersson's more about his offensive game than anything else. So yeah, that's where I am with Nico Hischier. I wouldn't go back and change that pick, especially with how he's played. I guess the last, what would it be now, like 80 games of his career. So
yeah, and that's the thing, is that I've said that. Of course, I would love to have Cale Makar. Like, of course I would. Getting Cale Makar also comes with a lot of sacrifices. You don't make the playoffs in 2018 with Cale Makar because he was in college, and you'd have Pavel Zacha as your first line center with that team. Taylor Hall is not winning an MVP with Pavel Zacha. The Devils probably forced him to come out of college after the first year because they were bereft on the defensive line, and Ray Shero wanted to have a winner. So we probably would have put him out there. So maybe he doesn't develop into one of the best in the world because he doesn't have that extra year of development in college to be a dominant star at UMass. Again, I could go on and on and on, but like you said, Makar wasn't even the best defenseman in that class going in. It was Heiskanen. He was supposed to be the generational talent. So I think that a lot of people would have been ripping their hair out if Shero went up there and made the Makar pick. I do know, I've been told that there were scouts banging the drum for Makar, but you've seen those rooms. There's a lot of scouts, and I'm sure a lot of them have very big opinions. So, I'm sure there was somebody in there who was like Pettersson. But because Makar is where he is, it's going to come out that if somebody was banging the table, it's going to come out that they were. But maybe the Devils lucked out because after all this, maybe they got themselves a defenseman that I'm not going to say he's Makar, but he's played like one of the best defensemen in the league right now, and that's John Marino. Simple trade, Ty Smith, third-round pick. They get John Marino from the Penguins. John Marino has been nothing short of stupendous. I will die in this hill. For the first 10 games, he's been one of the best defensemen in the league. He stops everybody's superstar. And he's going to get a real test tomorrow night with Connor McDavid. He's great on the penalty kill. And he's adding a little bit of offense, which is kind of more than I expected at this point. So what are your thoughts on John Marino? Let's just talk about it.
Yeah, so that trade looks like highway robbery right now, especially since the Penguins are having defensive issues, and I think Ty Smith has started the season in Wilkes-Barre, so I hope he gets it together. Obviously rooting for him, but there's really nothing you can complain about with how Marino's played so far. He's just made the right side of their defense so much deeper than it already was with Severson and Dougie Hamilton. You're just basically running 3 top 4 defenders on the right side now, and the offense is a little surprising, that's for sure, especially since his offensive production kind of fell off his last 2 seasons in Pittsburgh. But that's also a little bit due just to the way Mike Sullivan kind of asks his defensemen to play in Pittsburgh. I remember Dmitry Filipovich and Cam Charron were talking about this on the PDO cast back in the summer, just a little bit after the Devils had acquired Marino from the Penguins. They were talking about what Marino adds to the Devils roster and how he's really good at defending the rush, which we've seen a lot of in his first 10 games with the Devils. But why his offensive production fell a little bit too, and aside from Chris Letang in Pittsburgh, they don't really ask their defensemen to do too much offensively. It's you have this specific role, so you go do this. So Marino is really good at defending the rush, stuff like that. They'd ask him to go do that, and Letang is still quite good, so they're Letang kind of does whatever he does. So I think that's why we kind of seen the uptick in Marino's offensive game to start the season, because it's I'm writing about him, of course, in this 10 Thoughts article, and it's his points are not empty calorie points either. They're not just a bunch of secondary assists. Last night, that was a secondary assist on the stretch pass last night, but that stretch pass was to Boquist to set up Sharangovich's goal was insane. And then he almost set up Boquist for his first goal of the season. I think it was in the third period last night, which would have been a primary assist. So he's getting meaningful points, and then obviously the defensive contributions. He's just been fantastic defensively. The Devils are giving up, going back to the whole expected goals thing, they're giving up no quality chances when he's on the ice. He's just been a brick wall defensively. So there's nothing to complain about with him so far. He's been easily, I think, the Devils' best addition that they made so far that they had made this offseason.
So, since you're an avid listener of 32 Thoughts, I'll just sneak in this last question before we let you plug everything that you're working on. What were your thoughts when you heard that the Devils and Damon Severson are working on a possible extension? And obviously, Elliot Friedman said that term was the issue there, and that's probably obvious to everybody and their mother. But what were your thoughts, like with John Marino in tow for a few seasons, with Dougie Hamilton here for 6 more years beyond this year? What are your thoughts about them and Simone Nemetz in the AHL? What are your thoughts of them even working, like even talking about an extension with Damon Severson?
So I'm not surprised that they're talking about an extension with him. It's just I think it's going to depend a little bit on what they think of Simone Nemetz's development in Utica and how far away he is from being able to play. I would think Severson's going to want a bit of a long-term contract, but I can't see the Devils really going anything more than I would even say I think 3 years might be kind of the
3
limit for
years
them,
was
just
what's in
because.
my head.
Yeah,
3
because
years, yeah, that seems perfect.
Nemetz is not going to take that long, and then Seamus Casey looks like he'd probably be ready in a couple years too. He's having a really good freshman season at Michigan to start the season. You got a lot on the right side coming up, like high-end prospects. It's not like, Nemetz and Casey are just kind of these middling guys they picked. These were, their two top picks in the last draft. And I don't know if Severson would be good with a 3-year deal. I mean, Friedman said, term would probably be the issue there. So I would think that's probably not going to fly with him. But I mean, if he were to agree to that, it'd be interesting. It's a tough one to say because I haven't been able to watch any of the Utica Comets games, so I don't know how Nemetz is doing to start this season. I saw he scored his first goal the other night, but I think it's going to largely depend on how far along they think how much progress he's making as a prospect, and then they'll go from there. But it's going to be an interesting decision because if the Devils are in the playoff spot by the trade deadline, you can't really trade Severson. You're going to want to go into that playoff race the final few weeks of the season with him on the roster. So it's going to be an interesting decision that they're going to have to make in the coming months.
Yeah, just on that point, I mean, God forbid you trade, say you trade Severson at the trade deadline and then Hamilton gets hurt. Now,
Yeah.
what are you doing? Then I'm calling PK Subban and be like, so about that
Yeah.
retirement, how in shape are you?
Yeah, I mean that's a good point too, because part of the reason why the Devils have been so good defensively to start the season is that they have so much depth on the blue, and all three of their pairs. Brendan Smith may be taking one too many penalties, but I think he's actually been playing pretty decent hockey. So all three of their pairs have been pretty good. And say someone like Hamilton or Marino gets injured on the right side, and you trade Severson, you're going to have some problems on your hands. So, yeah, I see people asking, my friends asking me, are they going to trade Severson? I'm like, I don't really see a scenario where they trade him at the trade deadline unless they're really out of it and they're going to be sellers. But I mean, with the way they're playing right now, that something would have to go terribly wrong. So, yeah, I think that's the most interesting decision that the Devils will have in season. It will be Severson. What are they going to do with him as the deadline approaches and where they are in contract talks?
Yeah, absolutely. Alex Chavanci, a great friend of the podcast, one we've had on many times and we'll have on many times again. Alex, let everybody know where they can find your work, what you're working on. Tell us a little bit more about that 10 Thoughts piece that you're working on. Let us know what you got coming up.
Yeah, so I'm working on 10 thoughts on 10 games. If people read it, hopefully I can make it a recurring thing throughout the season where I do every 10 games. Kind of like what Dom I'm not going to even bother trying to pronounce his last name. Dom does at The Athletic with his 16 stats article. So it'd be a little bit similar to that. Then I'm also writing something for Todd Cordell for Infernal Access this Saturday. I haven't really decided yet, but I got a couple ideas in mind. And then, yeah, you can find me on Twitter. You can see it right there, AlexC_THW. That's where all my devil stuff goes. And yeah, that covers it.
Alex Chavanci, one of the best Twitter followers that's out there, interacts with fans, answers specific questions, and just kind of puts the advanced stats into a palatable format. We appreciate you, Alex. Thanks for coming on. And when the stats get crazy and my head starts spinning again and I look like the guy from The Hangover trying to count cards, I'll call you again.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me on. It's always a good time.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Alex.
Alex. That
Yeah,
is
take care, guys.
that is Alex Chavancy of the Hockey Writers. You can find him on Twitter at AlexC_THW. Nick, oh my goodness, in YouTube Live says, let's invite him into the inner circle of beef.
The inner circle of beef. I don't know what that is.
I don't know, but
It's like, Sam, you have this secret society that I don't know about, and I'm just very very confused and scared. I want to call your friends, but it's so. Who else is beeflit? Is Miles Wood beeflitics?
the entire team, we've got ranking systems.
Why don't you write
What?
about it on Pucks and Pitchforks so I know what you're talking about?
All right. Well, I'm still trying to figure out like how do you put a metric on beeflitics? You know, like a reliable metric.
If I were you, my creative mind says you should take the equation for force, which is like weight times speed plus something. Like find out what is the mathematical equation of force and use that to, replace some of the elements and make that your beeflitics.
Well, I think you're onto something here. Like, for example, rank number 3 in the beeflitics is Ryan Graves. He's mass. He's got a lot of mass.
Yeah, mass. What did I say? Weight? Mass.
Mass.
It's been a while since I've been in high school, Sam. So I used to be good at I used to be good at math, but now I'm just like I'm gonna let other people do the math, and I'm gonna give them credit.
Let me tell you something. I scored very high on my SATs in math, but when I got to college, my math went downhill. I don't know what happened. Did the same thing happen to you?
I'm gonna guess alcohol happened.
It could have been.
I think I got what did I get? I think I got a 600 in math, which is fine.
That's very good.
It's fine. Yeah, I mean it's fine. Again, I'm not gonna pretend like I was this great student, but I was. I
don't remember what I got. I think I got either 680 or 700 in math. I don't remember. I was terrible.
I ended up with an 11 and change. The funny thing is that I did worse in English, and now I write for a living. So it's like,
well,
whatever. I write for both of my livings,
different.
actually.
Yeah, everyone's path's different.
I just hated studying, so I just didn't do it. So if I didn't remember it, I was very good at guessing. I was a good guesser. So I got through a lot of things with B's and C's because I would guess well and just, not pay attention. And yeah, it was, I wasn't a good student, Sam, but it was fine. I always say that I got through college. Like I got through my I did phenomenal with the extracurriculars and internships and things like that. Like I was always really into those, and I'd have 2 or 3 at once. But when it came to actual class, like Sam, my English class was a sci-fi and fantasy class, which was phenomenal. I thought it was great, one of my favorite classes. But I was a journalism major. I mean, what was I doing reading Harry Potter? And I watched Firefly. That was my class. It was great.
Yeah, you know what? College was very interesting for me because that's where I learned. Like in high school, you study. Like I actually studied it in high school, but by the time I got to college, I did more negotiating for my grade than studying.
Yeah.
It's like I got a B minus, and it's like, okay, office hours. How can I bump this up? Give me a path, professor.
Yeah. And it was funny because West Virginia University doesn't recognize pluses and minuses.
Interesting.
They only do full 3.0, 4.0, 2.0, whatever. But one of my teachers still gave me a minus. He gave me an A minus to know that, he said, he was like, hey, if you come to class every day, I'll give you an A. And then he gave me an A minus, even though I went to class every day. And he was like, I guess he just didn't like my work. It was an acting class, Sam. It it was fine. It was one of those things you just do because you think it's going to be easy, and it was. But I got an A- because I got 1B in what are they called, the capstone courses or whatever they are. I got 1B, even though I got an A on every project, but I talked too much in class. I didn't know that was still a thing in college. I thought you could just. I thought we were adults, but
or taking attendance.
Yeah.
Real quick,
I paid you for this.
Yeah. Real quick before we go, I remember I had this sociology class in the summer. Figured out I'd take a couple of these gen eds away, but I took 2 college classes over the summer. The other one I got an A in. It was actually a gen ed computer science class. And I don't know, for whatever reason, I wanted a 4.0 in the summer just to say it. So that professor, after the final, I think I got a B-. So I actually went to his house. Now, this sociology professor is like a genius, but I think something happened to his brain, like LSD back in the 70s.
Oh, boy.
So he was just he's got 7 kids. His house is a wreck, but he's he's got his doctorate and he's teaching at Penn State. And I just sat down with him. He's like, write me a 30-page paper on blah, 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 da-da-da-da, and then I'll give you your A. So I actually did it. And you know what? The guy never even read it. But I got
so you just wanted to see it was a 30-page paper?
Yeah, you just want to see a 30-page paper. You're just oh, great. I'll put it aside.
Tossed it on the fire.
Yeah. Anyway.
Hey, well, good for you, Sam. Before we go, I mean, it's so wild that it's funny when we have these 2 guest nights, right, Sam? Because we don't get to talk much, but that's good. It's good to get the guests talk, and we want them to provide their analysis. But now there's so many topics that I want to talk about. I mean, Miles Wood has looked really good. We haven't talked about him that much, and Dougie Hamilton, quietly, I think he's been just fine. But one name that we haven't brought up who's been really quite good is Sharangovich. He's scoring again. He's looking really good. And you want to talk about beefalitics, he'll throw the weight around. He'll elude some defenders. He plays in the penalty kill, Sam. And the penalty kill has been phenomenal. Sharangovich is somebody is he underrated now?
I think, it's kind of like what you said about Jack Hughes. No one's really writing about him, and he's kind of lost in the amount of stories that's coming out from the New Jersey Devils. I'm sure Chris Westcott and that crew is having a field day because you got Jesper Bratt, that 1-year deal, a point a game, right? Mackenzie Blackwood is starting to play a lot better. Is healthy. Vanacek had that shutout. John Marino, we knew he was a good player, but we didn't think he would be this effective early on, especially. And, I mean, against Columbus, over 80 chances.
Wild.
That is like when Pete DeBoer coached the Devils, it was about swarming it up. That takes it to a whole new level, completely different level. And it's the way they're winning is different. Now, our first guest tonight, Scott Maxwell, some of the things he said, I'm not understanding or not so sure if I agree, but what the Devils doing right now is it sustainable long term? You can get lucky. You can be like the New York Football Giants and get lucky on a couple of these games, but is it sustainable long term? So far, what I've been seeing and what we've been seeing, I think it is. as long as you play a full 60 minutes.
Yeah.
And they're doing this without Palat. They've been on a tear without Palat. But Palat, and again, this is something I should write for Pucks. Palat, he may not be there physically, but he's already had an impact on this team where they don't get down on themselves. You didn't bring Palat in for his Jack Hughes skills. You brought in Palat to mentor these kids and give them a little confidence. Remember, they were down 0-2 and 2-0 against the Ducks on that third game, and I figured Lindy Ruff would be fired by the end of the game.
Yeah.
But history changed when Mackenzie Blackwood made a great save to still keep it 2-0 Ducks. And Palat calmly put the puck in the net and showed Jack Hughes, Nico Hischier, the path of just saying, hey, don't worry about it. Just get back on the train. You know, get back to good habits. You can do it quickly. And what a difference did that make? I mean, there were other things too, like the coaching changes and all that. But
Yeah.
I'm not too worried about Palat, you know, being on the shelf for a while, as long as he's still engaged with the young kids. And according to Amanda Stein, he is. So I'll take her word for it.
Yeah, I'm sure he's not like on the road trip. Like, I'm sure he's not traveling around Western Canada, but I'm sure he's around the facility for practices and stuff.
Oh,
so,
yeah. I mean, you can still FaceTime. You can still call, text.
Which brings me to my plug. I'm gonna do my best to write both these articles tonight for tomorrow morning, because we got the Lindy Ruff article that came out right before the podcast. How to save your job in 10 days. All about how Lindy Ruff's 10-day stretch went from people literally calling for his job and me and you having a conversation about how you can't be on that hill anymore that you want Lindy Ruff here, to now people are actively praising his system and praising the coaching job that he's doing. So that is out of Pucks and Pitchforks right now. But I'm going to write one on Palat and how the Devils are going to get through this time without him, and how I don't want to say that they're not going to miss him, because that seems a little mean, but in so many words, something along those lines. And then I'm inspired by our conversation, Sam. I'm going to try to get a Igor Sharangovich underrated piece out there as well.
I think you should.
So look for that tomorrow morning.
I think you should. And Jack Hughes, because he's just lost in the shuffle right now.
Maybe that'll be Friday morning.
But he's laughing all the way to the bank when he sees this.
He's cashing every single one of them checks.
Yeah, I hope I win the Powerball tonight, because I'll buy the Devils. I got to buy the Devils.
The Devils, I said that. Did you see my tweet?
No, I did not. Sorry.
The new, what is it called? Like the franchise values came out. Devils are sitting at, like, I think it's at $865 million.
So they went up $165 million from the last valuation that came about when Seattle, I believe, right? When
Something like that.
Seattle
Forbes does it every year, but this wasn't Forbes. This was a different company or a different publication. I can't remember off the top of my head. Actually, let me get the number. You start the music and I'll get the number.
Yeah. Well, I hope that if you have that kind of valuation of your company, the net worth of a company, entity like the New Jersey Devils, I was hoping that the Prudential Center would actually have better Wi-Fi access.
Yeah, right.
And cellular.
It's 825 million. I'm sorry, I overstepped, but still, it's still.
You know what?
If
you're the lone winner of tonight's jackpot, after you pay your taxes, you take the lump sum, you bring a partner in, you can buy the New Jersey Devils. What's that?
What was it, like 600 million? Right, it's about half.
Yeah, give or take.
Can I buy the Devils and claim them as a loss?
Can you claim the two first games as a loss too? Your taxes. I would lower beer prices. That would be the first thing I would do if I was.
Bring back dollar beer night. That sounds like
I would bring all
publicity
those
nightmare.
kind of promotional things.
Dollar hot dog night. Hot dog night. We can do that.
Yeah. Well, Nick, it was a pleasure. And go to pucksandpitchforks.com. And also Devils After Dark and Game Day Live tomorrow on the Let's Go Devils Network. Till next time, let's go Devils.